Good morning. You're listening to The Brief Wake Up, your mindful start to the day. I am Handel, your daily coffee companion, helping you wake up informed, thoughtful, and maybe just a little amused before the day gets old. If you're commuting, corralling kids, or just standing in line for caffeine, you're in the right place. Let's get you caught up. In health this morning, let's talk about caffeine and the brain. A new large study published in JAMA is adding to a growing body of evidence suggesting that regular caffeine consumption, specifically through coffee or tea, is associated with a significantly lower risk of developing dementia. This isn't a small effect. Researchers followed thousands of adults over years and found that moderate daily intake, roughly the equivalent of a few cups per day, correlated with a measurable reduction in cognitive decline and dementia diagnoses, compared with very low or no intake. So what's actually happening biologically? Caffeine is often thought of as just a stimulant, but in the brain, it behaves more like a protective signaling molecule. One of its main actions is blocking adenosine receptors. Adenosine normally accumulates during the day and signals fatigue, but it also participates in inflammatory pathways inside the brain. Chronic neuroinflammation is one of the drivers of neurodegenerative disease. By blocking that pathway, caffeine appears to reduce inflammatory signaling in neural tissue. It also increases neuronal firing efficiency and improves cerebral blood flow, meaning brain cells both communicate more effectively and receive better oxygen delivery. But possibly most important, caffeine influences amyloid metabolism. Amyloid plaques are one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Experimental and human observational data suggest regular caffeine exposure may reduce amyloid aggregation and improve clearance mechanisms in the brain's lymphatic system, essentially the brain's waste removal network that works heavily during sleep. Now, this doesn't mean more is always better. Very high caffeine intake worsens sleep, and sleep itself is one of the strongest protectors against dementia, because deep sleep is when the brain clears metabolic waste. So the relationship appears U-shaped. Too little offers no protection, too much erodes it. But in moderate amounts, coffee or tea, caffeine seems less like a guilty pleasure and more like a mild daily neuroprotective exposure. Not a treatment, not a guarantee, but possibly part of a long-term risk reduction pattern. Because sometimes prevention isn't a dramatic intervention. It's a small habit repeated for decades. The news is next. In the news, we first discussed developments that are emerging in one of the most consequential criminal cases of the past generation. Ghislaine Maxwell has now provided additional testimony to federal investigators about Jeffrey Epstein's network and operations. The importance here isn't that the story is returning, it's that it may be widening. For years, the legal focus centered almost entirely on Epstein himself. But complex criminal enterprises rarely exist around a single individual. Investigators typically move in phases. First, the primary offender, then corroboration, then anyone who may have enabled, facilitated, or knowingly ignored the activity. No new charges have been announced. But testimony like this is how prosecutors build cases carefully, not quickly. So this moment likely represents process rather than conclusion. Meanwhile, in a very different kind of news, NBC's Savannah Guthrie shared a personal update about her mother following a sudden medical emergency that required urgent care and ongoing recovery. She thanked medical teams and asked for privacy as her family navigates rehabilitation. The reason the story resonated widely isn't celebrity, it's recognition. Everyone eventually gets the phone call. Normal life divides into before and after. And the routines that structure our days are replaced by waiting rooms, decisions, and uncertainty. Public figures live publicly, but but crises remain deeply ordinary. And going internationally, Cuba is confronting a more systemic emergency: fuel. The country is currently struggling to reliably supply aviation fuel for international departures. Some airlines now have to fly in carrying extra fuel just to ensure they can leave, while others are reducing or suspending routes altogether. The immediate impact is travel disruption. The real impact is economic. Tourism is one of Cuba's primary sources of hard currency. When flights decrease, visitors decrease, and national income contracts quickly. The issue reflects a broader reality. An economy dependent on imported refined fuel becomes fragile when supply chains tighten and financing options shrink. Three different stories: a legal investigation expanding outward, a family facing sudden illness, and a country running short on energy, all illustrate the same pattern. Stability often feels permanent, right up until the moment it isn't. And what follows isn't shock. It's at times, particularly for Maxwell in Cuba, its consequence. The big sip is next. Today we reach the final segment of the Living with Absence series. We've talked about what grief does to the brain, why closure is misunderstood, how life and loss coexist, how identity changes, why capable people can carry quiet grief, and what happens when grief becomes stuck. Now we talk about where all of that is leading, not letting go, but carrying forward. One of the most consistent findings in grief psychology is this: people rarely lose their grief. Instead, they grow around it. At first, the loss feels central, like everything in life organizes around the absence. But over time, the brain begins to reorganize. The pain doesn't disappear, it changes shape. Psychologists call this integration. The loss becomes part of your internal architecture, not the center of everything, but part of what holds you up. You start noticing the relationship continuing in subtler ways, in how you make decisions, in the values you live by, in the phrases you hear yourself say, in the way you care for other people. The person is no longer physically present, but their influence remains neurologically active inside your sense of self. This is where ritual becomes important. Anniversaries, small traditions, moments of remembrance, not to reopen the wound, but to give the bond a place to live. Because bonds don't disappear when someone dies. They need somewhere to go. And over time, something surprising often happens. The grief slowly shifts from focusing on what was taken to recognizing what remains. The love, the imprint, the ways your life was shaped by theirs. Grief never fully leaves, but it can stop being a weight you drag. It can become part of the structure that carries you forward. Not closure, but integration. Across this series, we've seen that grief isn't a single emotion. It's a neurological process. The brain learning a world it never expected to exist. It disrupts prediction. It reshapes identity. It moves in waves. Sometimes it hides inside strength. Sometimes it needs help to move at all. And in the end, healing isn't forgetting. It's learning how love continues in a different form. You don't finish grief. You incorporate it. You don't move past the person. You move forward with them, carried in memory, behavior, and meaning. That's not weakness. That's what a bonded human mind does when a bond cannot exist physically anymore. This has been Living with Absence. And if you're carrying someone today quietly, privately, you're not doing it wrong. You're doing something deeply human. The lighter roast is next. There's something fascinating about siblings. You can be a surgeon, a lawyer, a CEO, a fully functioning adult with responsibilities, deadlines, and people depending on you. And within about 10 minutes of being around your siblings, you're 12 years old again. Nothing else in life has that kind of neurological reset button. You don't even notice it happen. It's automatic. The oldest starts organizing things they were never asked to organize. The middle starts negotiating peace that nobody requested. And the youngest, no matter their actual age, is still somehow being accused of something. You could have 3 mortgages, 2 kids, and a retirement account. But if your sibling says, "Mom always liked you more," your brain immediately opens a file last accessed in 1998. That's because sibling relationships are the first long-term social system your brain ever learned. Before coworkers, before friendships you chose, before romantic partners, your brain learned status, fairness, competition, alliance, and identity inside that one small group. And those patterns don't delete. They just go dormant. So when everyone gets back together, your adult personality doesn't disappear. It layers on top of the original version of you. You're not becoming childish. You're becoming chronological. The funny part is how stable the roles remain. The responsible one still feels responsible. The peacemaker still diffuses tension automatically. The rebel still pushes buttons, often reflexively. And everyone remembers a slightly different childhood, where they were clearly the reasonable one. Psychologically, it makes sense. Your siblings don't just know who you are. They know who you were while you were becoming who you are. And no later relationship has that kind of historical access. Which is why a single comment from a sibling can feel either incredibly comforting or disproportionately irritating. They're interacting with a version of you nobody else has permission to see. So every family gathering becomes a strange experience. You arrive as an adult and temporarily coexist with every previous version of yourself at the same time. Not regression, just original programming running in the background. Our commemoration is next. February 10th is a day about how humans respond to complexity in nature, in government, in intelligence, and sometimes even on our laptops. In 1809, Charles Darwin was born. His theory of evolution changed more than biology. It changed perspective. Humans were no longer separate from nature, but part of a continuous adaptive process. More than a century later, the United States ratified the 25th Amendment, creating a clear system for presidential succession and temporary transfer of power, an adaptation inside government so leadership could continue even when a human body temporarily could not. And in 1996, IBM's Deep Blue defeated world chess champion Garry Kasparov in a tournament game for the first time, the moment humans realized intelligence itself could exist outside the human brain. Appropriately, today is also National Clean Out Your Computer Day, the annual recognition that even our digital lives evolve faster than we can organize them. Evolution, continuity, artificial thought, and deleting files you don't remember downloading. Different scales, same idea. When systems become complex enough, survival depends on learning how to adapt. Today we talked about adaptation, in brains protected by small daily habits, in societies confronting consequence, and in hearts learning how to carry loss forward. Whether it's caffeine shaping long-term health, families reshaping identity, or systems evolving to survive complexity, the pattern is the same. Stability isn't permanent. Adjustment is. And sometimes progress isn't dramatic change. It's learning how to live wisely with what stays and what doesn't. This is Dr. Robinson for the brief wake-up. Stay calm, kind, and curious. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.